Teaching is about engaging human beings in their own world and their own lives and doing a deep study of that their whole life. I mean, we joke about the wonder, but wonder is open the door and have a look at something deeply, any study, and it's so remarkable.
And so there is that nugget at the heart of teaching that we all must remember and constantly be reminded of, is that the curriculum and the content is not bigger than that basic nugget of human interaction. The only one size fits all is that they all want a relationship with you. They all want to feel validated and to feel connected to you in some way.
More often than not, I'm finding that instructors know and value the relationship they have with students. And so we typically aren't working at that level. I find that most of the people I talk to know that they want their students to like and respect them, and they want to know about their students' lives in order to be better teachers for them. So it's, I think you just listen to what they're saying, and they'll tell you, where the energy is and where the emotion is, and that often is where they are looking for some kind of support or just someone else to talk to even. But everybody brings something pretty extraordinary to the table when it comes to teaching.
I think that you really need to work on making relationships. And once you establish relationships with the students and with relationships with maybe your graduate students that are doing your graduate teaching assistantships, then things just work together so much better. It seems to be the starting point for making sure that you can kickstart the learning process by making sure that you look like a person who's open to relationship. And there's even some very simple things that you can do to start establishing relationships with students. Like, I stand at the door and I say hello to people as they come into the classroom. And if anybody has a concern right away, they can talk to me then. Like, I have to leave, I have a doctor's appointment in half an hour or whatever. So it's just being a little more human, a little bit more compassionate and caring, and trying to understand where people are coming from and opening ourselves up to making sure that we show that we do care about how they're feeling and how they're interpreting the information that you're sharing, but based on a relationship.
I think that's the secret of teaching, is to be a friend with the students. As they come in, I like to greet them if I can, with the names and know every student and just where they're standing and be a friend. I want to get them through university to enjoy. I tell them they were my best days, university days at Sydney and York and Western. Really, I just loved university, and I tell them, look, if you're not enjoying it, there's something wrong. You've got to come and see me, or better still, see the counsellor, or it should be just fun. Of course, when I first started, I could remember most of them if it was only 10 or 20. But what I have to do now, if there's 100 in the class, I take a photograph of every student and I ask them to tell me where they come from, what their favourite sport is. And it just, funnily enough, the more information you have, the more you can get to know them. And I particularly like to know if they come from out of town, to try and make them feel that they're welcome here.
I found it very, very important to work hard at remembering the names of the students. And to the point I would make, sometimes I'd always, if I saw them in the hallway, I'd say hi, whatever. And sometimes I would get the name wrong. And I'd realize that as soon as I said it. But it was because I was trying to keep a lot of names on the top of my mind, and seeing them all of a sudden and have to bring up that name rapidly. But they never minded. It was just the fact that I said hello to them in a personal sense. They forgave the fact that I might have called them the wrong name. But they really appreciated that. It brought you down to their level, and it brought them up to your level.
The relationship between students and instructors has changed. I think in the past, there was in some respects almost some deferential type of perspective that students had, is that here's kind of an all-knowing person there. It's still true actually in my case. No, I'm just kidding. The idea there is with students, now they say, look, if I'm going to say in 1972 this occurred, I think 50 years ago, people would have wrote that down and said, oh, 1972, I got to remember that, things like that. Today, they're going to punch it up on Wikipedia or on the internet, and they'll put up there and say it actually wasn't 1972, it was actually 1974 and things like that, right? And so they understand, I think, today that they come to kind of this interaction with also knowledge and with access to other resources.
And students through that time period too, I guess I would have to say they became much more questioning. They started to realize that they could call you up on certain things, and so I think it got a little bit harder for some of the teachers that were used to not having any backlash from the students. They had to learn that students sometimes can be fairly militant, and they will tell you what they think. And so I think that changed quite a bit. I think just the association or the perception between the instructor and the student changed, where the instructor is not 2 levels above the student. It sort of collapsed a bit.
I've been teaching now for 24 years, and over that time, I know it's a long time, over that time there has been a significant change in the relationship between undergraduate nursing students and professors. When I was a nursing student, there was no questioning the instructor. It was, they told you what to do and you did it, and that was the end of that.
I think on the whole the students were quite enthusiastic because the classes were small. You could get access to the professors if you wanted to. You were not just a number of, shall we say, 150 students. That was a big asset when the classes were smaller. You could go into your professor anytime. We always had our doors open. So I think they just really appreciated that a lot.
Back in the 70s, having been at the university, there was quite a different relationship that we had with our professors from when I went to the University of Alberta. So it was far more formal at the U of A. There was more informality, partly because there wasn't that many students at the university when I came in the 70s. So I started in 1973, and I was here until 1977 getting my bachelor's degree in chemistry. I was quite intimidated by the professors, even back in the day, but if I needed to talk to them, I knew I could. You could just knock on their door and have access to them when you really had a burning question. And I think this is one thing the University of Lethbridge has done a great job of maintaining, is an open door policy. They still have access to the professors. We haven't really changed that much, even though our student body has grown tremendously over the number of years, but there still seems to be plenty of opportunity for students to come and speak to their professors if they want to, and engage in conversations.
Oftentimes when students come and talk to me in my office, many times, initially they start off talking about maybe something I said in class, or they have a question about something. But then, it gives you the opportunity to talk to them and say, especially let's say if they're first year students, so why did you come into management? Like, what was the rationale for that? What are you interested in? You might give them advice and say, if you're not sure, that's okay. Right? Why don't you take a wide variety of classes in lots of different disciplines? Maybe your preconception of something isn't correct. And so don't feel that you have to lock yourself in. It's kind of a long life.
Back in the day, there was more formal social graces that were observed. You would always call a professor either Professor so-and-so or Dr. so-and-so. You didn't call them by their first name, which many students do now.
You called them by their credential. So if it was Mrs., and many of them when I was a student, it was Mrs. There were a few people that were doctors of nursing, but very few, but you still addressed them as doctor, whatever their last name was. So it was very formal, the relationship that I had with the instructors when I was a student. Over the 24 years that I've been teaching, initially, that relationship was also quite formal. I might introduce myself as Dr. Sedgwick when I first start a class, but then after that, all of my emails, my text messages, it's all Monique. So then why would anybody call me Dr. Sedgwick if I'm addressing myself as Monique? So that, I think, reduces the formal relationship.
I think in many ways, the personality of the professor in the classroom makes a huge impact on students. So, and you never know how it's going to work. I mean, it's a personal relationship, right, in the classroom. So for some students, there may be a connection immediately. They think, they really understand what you're trying to say. They really get where you're coming from. They laugh at your jokes. They think you're funny. It's fun, right? Whereas other students may, for whatever, personality reasons, just not click with you, right? So I think that's the same. That's always been the same, right? And that's key, I think, and that key component of the personal relationship that you have as a faculty member with students is crucial for learning, for all students, but especially those ones that you get a strong connection with and you see them, you can mentor them a bit more deeply and encourage them to go further and maybe in academics.
I also like to say to my students, look, yes, I'm your instructor for this class, and it's important for me to be there for you for this class. But I also, am open after you finish this class. Stop by, come and knock on my door. Maybe you have questions about other classes, or maybe you have a question that I might not know the answer to, but I might be able to direct you to someone, right? And so if, again, the student feels that you're trying to develop a positive relationship with them, an open relationship, that it's not just about the instrumental relationship in the classroom, I think, again, they get more engaged with that, and they think, yeah, you're here and you're concerned about kind of my learning as a whole and not necessarily just about your class.
Having face-to-face, being in class, having first had knowledge about your students and so on, getting to really know the students, is one way and a very effective way about teaching. Because if you know those students, where they come from, what their backgrounds are, and so on, hey, you can put the information you're trying to get across in such a way that it'll make a little bit more sense. And then they feel, much more engaged.
You need to get to know them. You need to see them in a bunch of different circumstances to be able to understand what they're all about. And then you watch that change in maturity as they age, because it's a very formative series of years, right? You're 19 or 20 or 18, somewhere depending on when they actually enter for the next 4 to 5 years. And they're forced to do a lot of things that they were never forced to do before in order to be able to excel or even just, make it through the program. Because I guess it's important to you as a teacher to know what they're thinking and whether they're getting what you want them to, what you feel that they should be learning from you, and it helps that way.
We should be able to make it happen, and many of us can make it happen in the classroom, so that their formative experiences with university teachers are incredibly positive and memorable.
I think that we now realize the importance of that relationship between the student and the teacher, and how really valuable that relationship is to helping a student learn. Sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were untouchable. Right? There was the podium, and that was the clear demarcation between them and us, and we didn't wade out into them, nor did we even want them to come to us except on the office hours that we had posted. And we've become, I think, much more permeable in terms of that relationship and learning with and from each other. So it's that fundamental core of relationships still is the most important part of teaching.
Now I look at it and I see that the space between the students and the professors has shrunk. So it's not this hiding behind the lecture or the podium. It is like we're right in the middle, and it's becoming more of I always call it a Montessori directress model, where you are guiding and directing people and your students, your learners, to something. And that means you have to actually move out of that once traditionally known power base, which is I'm at the front of the class, and you have to assume that authority. The authority can still be there, and in fact it is, I think it's even more present when you're actually moving around and interacting with your students. So you're sharing the power, and I've always believed that by teaching you learn and by learning you teach. So that's the difference that I see now. I think it's much more active and it's more of a collaboration of scholars. It's a community of scholars and not just one person imparting information.
The idea of that relationship between students and professors, instructors, is, I think, deeper. I think that relationship has always been there. It's just different now, and I think in some respects the technology has helped facilitate it a little bit, especially for those students who are not as, I guess, proactive to come and talk to professors, things like that. Maybe they start that relationship with just sending a simple email as a query. There is a little bit of obviously distance then, and as that relationship builds over time, maybe in that first year, they didn't come to your office, but now in their second year they come to your office, things like that.
I get a lot of questions, I get a lot of emails a day, which I like, I like to correspond with the students. No, that is amazing, the emails. It's so we can get them any time in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. I think that has really helped education, emails.
I think with the change in technology, as an instructor, and I've had to learn this, and I do try to use it, again, it's the boundaries. That I need to be very clear about the expectation in terms of how available I am, what is appropriate to share with me, what is not appropriate to share with me.
I think as an instructor or as a teacher in the institution, you also have to, guard your own time. And you have to know when you want to put limits on that. And people then have to respect those limits. And so, when we talk about developing an open relationship and a relationship where the students can get close to the professors, it's not without bounds. You also have to be very careful in the sense that there is a line between being there for the student as kind of a facilitator of their learning and actually crossing the line where it becomes almost more informal and more friendship oriented. And I always try and keep that line to make sure that I am a professional. I have a certain responsibility not to treat this student as my friend or whatever, right? Because that's not the relationship we want to develop. And so you can become close, but you can become close within certain boundaries.
In this respect, I'll concentrate mostly on the FNMI experience, beautiful experience that I've had. And that it's where you're sharing right from the get-go, but you've also created a relationship that is long-lasting and it branches out into the community. So you don't just teach a class and say goodbye at the end of 4 months. For instance, I use Facebook, and most of the people, my friends on Facebook, are my former students or current students. And that can be, iffy for a lot of people, but that's how I check on them. I want to know how they're doing, and it's an expressed relationship of, it's almost like a family.
Coming from an age and being socialized where technology wasn't as there, that's where I've learned from some of my young colleagues and how social media can actually be leveraged with students, and how even the technology that we have here with our teaching center in terms of Moodle and opportunities that they provide in terms of even different ways to deliver material, that has been extremely valuable. And so that relationship with students in terms of whether it's that personal close relationship or student learning relationship, is always, it's a dynamic type of a relationship, and it's always changing. And again, that's what makes this job fun, right? It's that it's not static. The people change, but also the relationships change.
To me, it's so interesting because virtually you could go anywhere on a podcast, or you could go on a MOOC, do all this stuff, and you could actually talk to people in different areas, different countries. But to have people here who bring that experience and have a different envelope to present, it makes the learning, I think, much more relevant. Now we're seeing people from everywhere, and I like that. I like that tapestry. And that's, I think, being reflected into the teaching that we see now.
We actually are finding, a more diversity of students. Obviously, age is one of those factors. Some students have embarked upon careers, found that it hasn't been as fulfilling, now have come back. At the University of Lethbridge, we also have, obviously what we call our post-diploma program. So we have students who may have taken a college diploma in the past, have worked for a few years in the industry, and are finding again now that they actually need the degree, so they're coming in back. The question is that There's value in all of that diversity, and the idea is to bring out that value. So the idea is to talk or to have a dynamic environment in your classroom where then students can talk about their experiences.
And that's one of the things I think is nice about the diversity that we often see in the classroom, because there are students who will ask a question and challenge what you've just said or make you think about it more. And often I get questions from students that make me go and do some research so I can come back and inform the class. So clearly there's learning that goes both ways, and it's beneficial for everybody because the people in the class that hadn't asked the question still get the benefit of hearing the question and then learning what the answer will be maybe in a day or two. So I think there's a lot of learning that comes from the students as well. The way they ask a question, ways that you may not have thought about a particular issue before.
A studio setting is perhaps the most privileged of settings that we have on campus. Yes, professors all over work one-on-one with students, but this one's designed for one-on-one teaching. It's very wonderful to work with these students. It becomes very personal. You know, their successes are felt very strongly by their professors. The things that don't go well are felt very strongly by their professors. You know, it becomes a very personal relationship in many instances. And more importantly, we start to form the concept that we're a learning community. In that case, a community of two. And trust relationships are extremely important. So that is the most wonderful teaching environment to be involved in.
It's been a great journey, and I think we're very proud of how our students have done in the world. They've done some really neat things in this community and beyond this community.